on nanomaterials and nanotechnology. At the outset, I congratulate the departments of physics for taking this initiative. Am I audible?
Yes, yes. Now you are.
Little bit breaking, sir,
And
actually.
I take this opportunity to thank Dr. B. Sridhar sir for accepting our invitation and coming today to give this lecture on nanomaterials. As you all know, there is a lot of research work going on nanomaterials nowadays. It is not exaggeration if I say that nearly 75% of the research that is going on these days, it is purely on nanomaterials. And we are also seeing the applications of these materials everywhere. You name any field, definitely there will be an application of nanomaterial in this field. Recently, I have studied an article that graphene-based batteries are going to come within 1 year. And if they come, they are saying that they get charged 18 times more faster than the ordinary lithium batteries. So if it comes out, then soon we will see electric vehicles on our roads. Because right now the problem is to refill petrol, it takes lesser time than recharging your car batteries. So when they get 18 times more charger, the times will be almost the same. And hence these are going to be the next motor vehicles. Similarly, wherever you go nowadays, we are seeing about nanomaterials only. So we thought most of the people are also working on this. In our college itself, nearly 6 faculty members, they are working on nanomaterials. Some are working on nanoferrites, some are working on nanocarbon tubes, and one madam, she is working on nanofertilizers. So keeping all this in view, we have decided to organize this lecture on nanomaterials. So I invite you all. And before I request our speaker, let me introduce him to you all. Dr. B. Sridhar, he did his BSc, MSc, MPhil, and PhD from SV University, Tirupati. After completing his PhD, he joined as a research associate in the University of Hyderabad. After that, he went to do his postdoc from Japan University. And after completing his postdoc, he joined as a faculty in the same university. And after working for nearly 4 years in that university, he came back to India and joined IICT in the year 1998. And after that, he held various positions. And presently, he is the senior principal scientist at IICT, Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, Hyderabad. He is a life member of many societies, and he is a member Academic Council of JNTU Hyderabad, member Board of Studies of Osmania University, and member Board of Studies of many eminent colleges and universities. And till now, he has guided 8 students for their PhD. 2 students are pursuing their PhD under his guidance. He has guided 45 MTech projects and nearly 78 MSc projects. So far, he has published 379 papers in national and international journals. He has presented 143 papers and he has got 6 US patents to his credit. We are very fortunate to have you here, sir, today. I now invite you to continue with your lecture. Thank you, sir.
Okay. At the outset, I would like to thank Satyanarayana Garu and my good friend Divakar from the DRDO lab from Isaac, who has actually introduced me to you all people. And well, it's a pleasure that I am able to give this webinar on talk for your for you all. Well, to accept the fact, this is the first time I am actually giving this webinars. So for that, I will always be indebted to you people for giving me this opportunity. So, well, today, as was requested, I am going to talk on nanoscience and nanotechnology, which is a concept today because it's an ever-growing area. So every day it's changing its, applications, and their various, applications and various things. So that is why it's always a, new science that is developing with an hope that, this technology, this whatever that we are able to look at or develop or synthesize can be, used. So when about the institute, as was told by your HOD, Dr. Srinath. So I joined the institute in 1997, and from initially it was all about the characterization facilities that were being developed in the institute that made me work in this area of nanoscience and nanotechnology. As you can see on the screen, there are a few things like, this is the X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy instrument. I will briefly talk about it in my lecture because it's one of the very unique kind of an instrument that we have in the institute. And the most important one, the TEM, that is the transitional electron microscope. This also came in the year 2002. And these two characterization facilities actually made me to work in this area of nanoscience and nanotechnology. As you all know, IICT is all about chemistry and chemical technology. And when we talk about chemistry also, it is all about natural products, organic synthesis, and so on. But I was in the inorganic and physical chemistry division, where we had an opportunity to work on materials, novel materials for where we could develop materials for catalytic applications. So that is how I entered into this area of nanoscience and nanotechnology. And with the kind of work that my students have done, and with the kind of support that I have got from various friends from various universities and various institutes, I could able to work and look into the changes these materials are making in the real life. So let me slowly start with our journey, and I hope just before, at least 10 minutes before, please let me know so that I can conclude the lecture. Well, one of you can please let me know. Yeah. So when we have to talk about this kind of this thing, so let me take it like this. Let us define this nanoscience and nanotechnology terms. And most important of all of this is this area of nanotechnology is a multidisciplinary area, which means that basic sciences, it can be chemistry, it can be physics, it can be biology, it can be mathematics, it can be all sorts of basic sciences have to work together. That is how it's an interdisciplinary area. We have to work together and try to develop these materials for various applications. So if you have to define nanoscience, it is the study of phenomena and manipulation of materials. And at what scale? At the scale of atomic, molecular, and macromolecular scales, where the properties of these materials are completely different from the bulk material of the same material. So for example, I've just taken one example where it's gold as one example here. And all of us know that gold is an inert material and it is pale yellow in color. And but when it is taken into nano dimensions, the colloidal solutions of gold take so many different colors. So when, see, optical, or for all of us, seeing is believing. So if you look at these colloidal solutions, you see that there are all gold nanoparticles. And because we are able to see the color, we are talking about the optical properties here. So we are able to see the change in color. And it means that there is something different in all these different colloidal solutions. So as we go by, we will slowly try to understand what actually makes this kind of changes. Now, once these nanomaterials are developed, it is for the technologies to be used. So these nanotechnologies are the design, characterization, production, and application of these structures and devices and systems with novel properties, because as I already told, that these nanoparticles have properties completely different from their bulk materials. And by these properties and functions by controlling size, shape, and nano of these nano scale materials. Well, all of us know what is a nanometer, and also let us not worry much about it. But what is very important is it is not necessary that it should have only in the form of a sphere or some definite shape. It can take any shapes, like as put it here. It can take rods like this. It can take tubes like this. It can take the cubes like that. It can take plates like this. So, or a sphere or a like that. Yeah, so the main important thing is any one dimension, if it is between 1 to 100 nanometers, it is a nano material. Any one, for example, if you take this tube, it can be few microns in length, but if the internal diameter of this tube is less than 100 nanometers, it is a nano tube. Similarly, this rod can be few microns in length, but if the thickness of the rod is between 1 to 100 nanometers, it is a nano rod. Similarly, this plate or whatever. So like that, these days, the people are able to synthesize new materials. Like you can name like anything, like nano rice, nano flowers, nano spindles, nano rods, nano tube, whatever. So these kind of shapes are also making a difference, and we will try to understand like how we could synthesize some materials in different shapes and how they are actually showing some difference in various applications. But I, as a scientist in the Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, mostly I have concentrated on the catalytic applications of these materials. I will show all these, the studies that I have done by using these materials in catalytic applications, so that I can impress on you that these materials in nano form are definitely making a difference in their applications. Is it clear?
Sir, you are clear, sir.
Fine, thank you. Okay, now let us look at some of the books that, Willy, as you all know, is a very famous publisher. If you look at some of the books that are coming out of these kind of publishers, there's only one publisher that I have taken. You can see that they're on all areas. I talked about catalysis, magnetism, agriculture, food science, food packaging, electronics, water, you name it and have it. So there are applications in a diverse areas, and it can be nanophotonics, energy substitute, because people know that it is the silicon wafers that are being used as photocatalytic converters or photovoltaic cells. But these days, people are able to develop ferrites and other kind of things which are showing better efficiency when compared to the conventional photovoltaic cells. So like that, it is, these are finding applications in diverse areas. Now let us look at this nanoparticle. It looks so simple, but there are few areas that are making all the difference. So, and if you look at that, these are the 4 areas that are making all the difference. We have talked about the size and we have talked about the shape. Size, as I already told, anything between 1 to 100 nanometers is a nanoparticle. And it can take any shape, about which also we talked. It can take sphere, star, cube, rice, whatever shape you put, nano flower, nano whatever. So it can take any shape. But other than this, there are 2 other parameters that we have to think about, and those are the materials that can be brought into this, this scale of nano dimension. So these are some of the examples, like you people have all heard, which is very well known. It is not necessarily metal particles. It can be metal oxides, carbon nanotubes, polymers, hydrogels, whatever. So there are so many different kinds of materials that are, that can be made into these nanoparticles. And the surface, which is making all the differences, you can modify the surface. You can, this is what is called surface functionalization or surface modification by various other ligands, and make the surface tunable so that these surfaces can be used for various applications. Depending on your application or your kind of interest, you can modify the surface also and try to protect the properties of the nanoparticle and also use these in the way you want them to be used for. But when we are talking about this, there are many physicochemical influences that are taking place on these nanoparticles. Because, for example, let us look at some of these biological materials. It is not necessary that it should always be a constructive effect on the metabolism of the, say, for example, human beings or animals or various ecosystems. So in such cases, there is a possibility that they can be some diverse effects of these nanoparticles also on them. But to understand those things, we have to look at these kind of parameters that actually influence these materials at the interface and such dimensions. So we have talked about the size and shape. We talked about the surface area, because that is the area which is available for your modifications or such activities, and the charge that is there on the surface. When you're talking about photocatalysis or photovoltaic cells and all, it is the valence and the conduction band differences that these nanomaterials are making a difference in their band gaps and all. By, as I said, we can modify and have such functional groups that are of our interest and all such things. And when these nanoparticles are suspended in medium, like can be water, it can be some organic solvents and other things, or some like, for example, sodium acetate. Okay, it is a salt of acetic acid, sodium salt of acetic acid. So how the properties change when these materials are put in such organic salts or any kind of things. The surfactants are there, polymers, you can also have polymerize different kinds of polymeric reaction or polymeric material on the surface, so that you can tune the properties of the surface for your need. So like that. And it is this, when you are suspending these materials in liquids, so you have a solid and a nanoparticle and the liquid that is there in this surrounding. And the most important thing is the interface between the solid particle and the liquid, which also plays a very important role. So that is why, people generally do like, the zeta potential to get the surface charge, and such things are also there, which are very important. And as I told that, when we are talking about these materials in biological applications, there are many things that are, happening in this kind of thing. Like you have, we have to understand this biomolecule interactions, because like lipid, it can be lipids, proteins, DNA, or whatever. So how these biomolecules interact with the surface of these nanoparticles. So there it is possible that you will have to surface modify the nanoparticles, so that these materials like these proteins or lipids can also form bonds and have a covering on these particles or such kind of things. So there are many possibilities that are there, and that is why it has become very important to understand these nanoparticles and their interface and their suspension medium, whatever it is they are placed. So as you can see in this picture very clearly, you have the nanoparticle, you have the surface liquid interface, which is here, and this is the suspension medium. And these are some kinds of lipid bilayers that are trying to be attached to this interface. So in such kind of things, we have to look at properties like the hydrophobicity and hydrophilicity. So if it is hydrophobic, fine, it can come and attach to it. But if it is hydrophilic, it will repel. And in the process, it will not be able to get attached to this nanoparticle. So depending on the property of this interface, we have to modify the surface such that it is actually suitable for these kind of lipid layers to come and attach onto this nanoparticles. So like that, if you look at this nanobio interface, there are so many different forces that are forces that are playing roles. Like you can see the van der Waal interactions, the electrosteric, electrostatic. These are kind of various interactions that are happening on this kind of particles. So when we have to tune those things, these are some parameters that people try to look at, like what is the surface charge, the state of dispersion, the stability and biodegradability, because it has to, once there should not be any biodegradation taking place once these biomaterials are put with nanoparticles. So that degradation should be avoided. Like that ionic strength, pH, temperature, all these play a vital role in this kind of interface, nanobio interface, or any kind of material interface kind of things. So as I have put in here, particle characteristics contribute actively to the interaction with the medium through the promoting the absorption of ions, proteins, natural organic materials and detergents, double layer formation, dissolution, and minimizing the free surface energy by surface restructuring so that they can be stable over a period of time. This article is a very good article from Nature Materials, which gives a very good idea about the various influences that, especially in, nanomaterial, nanoparticle and biological applications. So people can have a look at this kind of this article in natural materials. Now, coming to the synthesis. Well, I'm sure all of you know, there are basically only two processes. One is the top down and the other one is the bottom up. So top down, as the name suggests, you have bulk material and you try to make it into smaller pieces such that you end up having materials of nano dimension. In the other way, that is the bottom up, you start with atoms and molecules and try to nucleate, form a nucleation, and then that nucleus is getting self-assembled into various structures. It can be nanoparticles as such, or increase in the particle size or shape or whatever. So here you're starting from atomic scale and then trying to develop these kind of nanomaterials from the from ionic or atom state to the nanoparticle dimensions. So these are basically two things. I will try to explain this in my future slides. So we have already talked this. So if you look at the top to down approach, where the bulk is getting brought down into the nanoparticle size. So there are physical processing methods, because you have to either grind like normal this thing. So you have to cut it or etch it, grind it, or ball mill it, so that you can end up having these materials in the nano dimension form. Lithography and all, little expensive techniques, but people use them and try to work on those things. And when we are talking about this bottom up approach, as I have already told, we start from the atomic scale and try to develop. And these are physical techniques, little expensive in the sense where few like physical vapor PVD, that is physical vapor deposition, evaporation, sputtering, so on, and chemical techniques like CVD and all. And these are self-assembled monolayers where these ions they start at the ionic stage and then go on to the higher stages. So mostly, we at IICT are working on these methods by, Sol Gel method and so on. I will try to explain that. So we have talked all this, but in between, like, this top-down methods and bottom-up methods, where there is the biological, synthesis, which is a green method, green synthesis of these nanoparticles, has also caught up this attention. And that is how they are able to come up with green methods where it is easy, efficient, and eco-friendly, eliminates the use of toxic chemicals. I will try to tell what are the toxic chemicals normally we use when we try to reduce these metal ions into metal nanoparticles. And so these can be eliminated and consume less energy and produce safer products without any byproducts. And they can be also, most of the times, these are biocompatible, which is like, you can be safe when they are synthesizing or playing with that. So some of the examples that people are trying to use this, like microorganisms can be used for the synthesis of these materials by green processes, marine sources, plant sources, and enzymes. I have used all this, especially gums. I will try to explain in my work, where these they have everything in it. Like it is a very good reducing agent. It is a good surfactant. It has crystal growth properties and everything in it. So when they are naturally available, there is no point looking at synthesizing these materials by chemical means, where as mentioned here, it is like we don't have to use toxic materials. So some, as you can, this is only a listing of all the possible elements that people have already synthesized by all the various methods, like physical methods, chemical methods, and biological methods. You will see that because the green method, that the biological methods are have their limitations, because these cannot be used for applications in electronics and so on. So there there is a limitation there, but still there are materials which are possible to be, synthesized by biological route also. And we have tried to use all those things in our work. So for example, here, green synthesis of silver nanoparticles and chemical synthesis. So if you, for example, here you take this, silver nitrate is the precursor for silver nanoparticles. You have taken in this, we have taken this root extract, mix them together at, for about 2 hours at around 90, heating at 90 degrees. You see that silver nanoparticles, which can be, used for antimicrobial and antibacterial studies and so on. Here, silver nitrate with, this is the reducing agent, like trisodium citrate is the reducing agent. So this ions, like silver ions, are reduced to silver nanoparticles. And here again, these can be used for applications for antimicrobial studies. There is a difference. I will try to explain about this. You see some, this small spears on this. So I will try to explain what are those spears and how will they make a difference when we look at these materials synthesized by biological route. So here again, there are some critical parameters which are also very important. And these are the ones which can be controlled to synthesize these materials. Like biological synthesis, you have the metal salt, you have the microorganism or the plant extract, you take them together. And these are the parameters that need to be, optimized, like in an incubation period, the ratio in which these two are mixed, the temperature at which the reaction is performed, because in my earlier slide, I showed you that it is done at 90 degrees. So here you can play with the pH. So with that also, you can end up materials of different sizes and different shapes and aeration or calcination, or those are all the things that are also there. So if by doing so, if you can by playing with these parameters, you can synthesize these materials in different shapes, like your square, sphere, spherical, triangular, hexagonal, rods, and so on. So these are all possible. These are all colloidal shapes of these materials which are possible by these kind of studies. Well, when you talk about advantages and disadvantages, well, it all depends on how you want to use them and what is your application. And it is that which actually makes all the difference. So some advantages are there. Mostly top-down approaches are, little expensive. These are, and you have I put some disadvantages like broad size distribution, but that is a major challenge for nanochemist or a nano scientist, that, you should have uniform particle size, uniform size distributed particles in these, in your material. So that there are some limitations in the top down and there's some bottom up, but most of the times we have to compromise and make hybrid kind of systems where we will be able to synthesize materials which are having properties of better properties that are actually needed for our kind of work. So in the synthesis of nanoparticles, as I have already told, liquid phase, gas phase, vapor phase, so on and so forth. But we are following liquid phase synthesis at IICT, and in that also we are doing by co-precipitation, sol-gel process, hydrothermal or solvothermal synthesis, and biomimetic synthesis. So others are also there, but these are the various liquid phase synthetic routes that we are following at IICT, like co-precipitation, sol-gel processes, hydrothermal, solvothermal synthesis, and biomimetic synthesis. As I said, the most main challenge, the important challenge is to have these materials with monodiversity. So monodispersity is the main problem that has to be achieved, so that you have particles of uniform size and uniform shape. And that is how I put the size and shape control. And once you have developed a protocol for the synthesis of these materials, you should be able to reproduce the same material with size and shape. And that is why reproducibility is one another very major important thing. And when you do this at lab scale, and then when you do at bench scale and then scale up the reaction, then also you should be able to maintain the size, shape, and the reproducibility of the materials. So like this, people are, it's like it's a science in itself, because like in architecture, people design beautiful complexes by different, according to their a taste, like, so that people can appreciate the kind of architecture that people have developed. So similarly, nano science also means nano architecture is another thing where people are trying to design materials with novel shapes and novel properties. Now, Sol gel process. So this is, as I said, it's a solution route, a wet chemical technique, where you start with the chemical solution, and then it colloidal particles or sol is formed, which is an integrated network, ends up into an integrated network, which is called a gel. So mostly people use metal oxides, alkoxides, or metal chlorides as the precursors. And these are, both two things, hydrolysis and polycondensation. These two things happen one after the another. So when we talk about hydrolysis, definitely water is the source, one source, and then the hydrolysis, and then takes the polycondensation reactions take place. So once you form this metal oxide metal bond or metal hydroxy metal bridges, it is like a gel. So you have to dry it so that you can remove the liquid phase out of the gel, and then once you calcine it, you can have materials which have enhanced mechanical properties and so on. So this is a general thing, but I'll show you one example, a Stauber method of synthesis of silica. It's a robust method where you can control the size of silica particles and have uniform particles of silica by this method, and anything between 10 to 200 nanometers. The precursors used are ammonium hydroxide, absolute ethanol, tetraethyl orthosilane is the one which is the silica precursor, and a few drops of water, and you stir it to 3 to 30 hours, you end up getting these silica dispersed nanoparticles. So this is maybe people who want to synthesize silica nanoparticles can make a note of this article, and it gives a very good idea about the synthesis of nanoparticles. I myself have used this in my work. I will show in my slides how we could be able to, by making a little difference in the precursor ratios, we could able to say, synthesize these materials in different sizes. So general route, there are two, one is what is called, depending on the gelation, like, it is a particulate gelation or a polymeric gelation. Basically, this is, as I put it here, the chemical precursor is what is needed: water, alcohol, and the catalyst, because for the gelling properties to take place. And it is the hydrolysis and polycondensation that results in these kind of networks or bridges, and this results in the formation of a gel. And those things are there. But depending on the the gelation process, where it can be a particulate gel or a polymeric gel, the only thing is here you use a polymer molecules for the process, and that's how you get materials here. Then the drying is there, where the shrinkage of the gel takes place, and then you have a dense material, which, as I said, like it has enhanced, like we can not necessarily mechanical properties, all sorts of properties where it can be understood and try to look into. So some of the ethoxides, the precursors, for example, for these kind of materials are like silica, for silica ethoxide, silica methoxide, boron and butoxide if it is boron, so aluminium, germanium, titanium, and zircon. So these are some precursors that we have tried to mention. But other than this also, people use some chlorides, metal chlorides or metal halides also can be used for these kind of materials, synthesis of these kind of materials. So if you look at this slide, is mainly to show you the application of Sol-gel methods in various. Sir, namaste, sir. Satyanarayana garu.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste, sir.
Sir, sorry, the distraction.
Parle, sir. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
No, we should make use of your service, sir. We should be very much thankful to you.
No, sir. I also thank Divakar at this occasion, because it's because of him we are all together here.
Sure, sir.
It's very nice meeting you here, so sometime we will definitely meet.
Certainly, we'll have some physical. See that lecture also we are trying to arrange at the college, sir. Later, we'll see.
No problem, sir. We will make it. No problem.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So when we are talking about this application of Sol-gel method, what I want to impress here is that you will see that, it can be photonic functions, electronic functions, thermal functions, chemical functions. I've already told, because we are ourselves using Sol-Gel method for the synthesis of this catalyst in our case. So mechanical functions. So all these kinds of, functions are being influenced by the materials that are synthesized by this Sol-Gel method. So like, what are the factors that are, for example, if let us take one example here, like optical and photonic functions, you will see that, fluorescence, solar collector, solar cells, laser elements, laser guide, depending on, they doped with transition metal and rare earth metal ions, you are able to, synthesize materials which can be used as, light guides, optical switches, light amplification, and so on and so forth. So, and like if you are looking at biological applications, you can entrap, like an encapsulate or entrap enzymes or in these kind of materials, and then try to use it. So I will try to look at these kind of things when we are talking about the synthesis of, hollow materials and such like this. So hydrothermal or solvothermal synthesis, well, it's a new science in itself. But if you have to take it as a common thing, our pressure cooker is an example, which, you heat, whatever the contents are, and with less time and with the pressure that is developed inside, you see that, things happen very fast, and in the process you save fuel and so on. So here again, it's the same thing. Only thing is it's an autoclave here, where all the required starting material are put, and then you try to heat it at the boiling points of the solvents that are there. And if it is an organic solvent, you have what is called solvothermal synthesis. And if that solvent is water, you call it hydrothermal processing or hydrothermal synthesis. So we have used both these techniques, and I will try to explain when I talk about those materials. Yeah, one example is here. This is in fact an unpublished work, but still I'll just try to explain here. We tried to synthesize alpha Fe2O3 capsules. If you look into the SEM picture here, these look in the form of capsules. So people call it nano capsule or whatever, depending on whatever it is the thing. So, well, slowly, if you look at the various precursors, SDS, which is sodium dodecyl sulfate, iron chloride is the precursor for iron, sodium acetate here. And these are the main three precursors. You do some sorts of things, and you put it in the autoclave and heat it at around 140 degrees for over 24 hours, then cool to room temperature. Whatever you have got, you wash it with ethanol and distilled water, dry it at 60 degrees for 12 hours, you have this material. So basically, if you see here, as I said, size and shape is what makes a very major challenge. You see that they are uniform size and uniform shape. So these materials, actually, we try to go to the next stage where, we have, have a nano composite of these alpha Fe2O3 and titanium off, which is metal oxide frameworks. So there is a difference in these two slides. One is, this is an hydrothermal method. Okay, this is a hydrothermal method, whereas here it is a solvothermal method. The solvents used are DMF and methanol for both this is the titanium precursor for titanium isopropoxide, and alpha Fe2O3, the one synthesized in our earlier slide. So these two are taken as the precursors. We use them and see that capsule is gone forever. You see that you have a different kind of a material, which is having this kind of shape. I tried to put it, in the slide you can see that, these are all kinds of spheres, hollow spheres with the kind of this thing. So this is a normal TEM image. And when we look into the elemental mapping and all those things, we can see it very clearly where exactly this titania is there, where exactly iron oxide is there and all. So if you see this is the TEM image, this is an Hadalf image. Here you can see it's an image of the overlay of all the elements that are there in the material. And here you can see that most of it is titanium. That is why you see that the shape, all this shape, which is of titanium and oxygen, whereas the small area which is here is the one which is due to the iron that is present. So by this chemical mapping, we are able to locate the materials and their distribution in these kind of materials. So this is actually an unpublished work, but still the importance here is we are able to look at, see, nanoscience and nanotechnology existed since ages. But what the main difference is, we are able to see these materials because of the development in technology, like we have FEGS, TEMs and all, or atomic force microscopes and all, where we are able to see these nanomaterials. And not only that, we are able to understand the mechanism and the reactions that are happening at these nano dimensions or nano scale. So that is where we are able to understand and appreciate these kind of nano materials. So the next one in this example, for example here, this is silver nanoparticles synthesized by various routes like physical, chemical, microwave, radiation, sonochemical, biological routes. You can see that the material is the same, but depending on the route that is taken, we are getting particles and shapes of different, like nano flowers here, nano spheres here, cubes here, rods here, and this kind of nano bars and all. So depending on the kind of technique that we have, people used, they are able to synthesize the same material, the silver nanoparticles in different shapes. By here, tuning the reaction conditions. They're all decahedral silver nanoparticles with the times at 6, 10, 20, 15, and so on. You see that they are trying to getting established, or that shape is getting very clear with the time. So this is the reason, people are looking at various routes for the synthesis of the same material, because depending on its shape, the properties or the applications can also differ. So that is why they are thinking of this and trying to tune these methods. So, well, after listening to all this, well, definitely the question comes, like, we have not talked about the properties. So the why nano? It is because I have already told that these materials in nano dimension have properties completely different from the bulk. So then what are these properties? The properties are like some examples like mechanical strength, thermal stability, catalytic activity, electrical conductivity, magnetic properties, optical properties. But optical properties is the one because we can see and we start to believe. That example is from the gold colloidal nanoparticles. Gold we see normally, but in the colloidal form, we could see that they have different colors. So that means that there is something happening, and that is what is making all the difference, and that is the interest in all these kind of materials. So they wide applications and nanofabrication device, biology and catalysis and all. So mostly we are working into nanocatalysis, and I will try to share some examples. Let us look at one example, the melting point of gold. It is generally about 1000 degrees that normal bulk gold material gets decomposed. I mean, you can melt it. But as you see that there is a decrease in the particle size, the temperature is also coming down. For example, if a particle of about 1 to 2 nanometers, these gold nanoparticles melt at around 500, which is about 50% less temperature. So that there is 1000, and as the size decreases, the melting point is coming down to about 500 degrees centigrade. So that's how you can see a difference in the melting point. One property here. Optical, we have seen there is a change in color. Okay, so that is there. But this is one example where you can see that similarly you can expect such properties difference in mechanical or optical band gaps when you talk about photocatalysis or photo applications. So like that, depending on whatever is the application, you will see such change in property, and that will make all the difference. So as I have already told, the major challenge is to have these particles of uniform size and shape. So here are some examples here. Silver nanocubes, they are all uniform in size and uniform in shape. In the lower example, you have gold nano boxes. You can very clearly see their faces very nicely cut, and edges are also very nicely cut. So that means that they are all of uniform size and uniform shape. So that is the major challenge that people are looking at. then how do you, start to, believe that these are having different properties? So let us take this example and look at, silver nano prisms, silver spheres, silver spheres, silver spheres. Material silver is the same, shape is different, sizes are different. Like it's 100 nanometers here, 120 nanometers here, 80 nanometers here, and 40 nanometers here. And if you look at the colloidal solutions, the colors are contrastingly different. So similarly, if you look at gold spheres of two different dimensions, 100 nanometers and 50 nanometers, the colloidal solutions of these gold nanospheres is completely different. So that means that we are talking about optical properties here. So that means that the size and also the shape is affecting these optical properties. So they're influencing these optical properties. So that is why we have to look at these, understand these kind of things and try to go ahead. Slowly coming to my areas of interest, like, like I'm, this is a slide which shows my area since some time that I've started working on this, like, synthesis characterization applications, where we have started with, silica nanoparticles, then we started with torsional nanoparticles, polyaniline nano, structures. Then we used gums, like gum acacia for stabilizing metal nanoparticles. We have also worked on magnetic separable nanoparticles, and we have done a little bit work in biomineralization and bio mimicking of these materials. And recently we are working on the generation of CO2, hydrogen, and also the conversion of CO2 into value-added products and such kind of areas, where we have tried to synthesize these materials for the various applications. So I will slowly try to explain you what I've been doing, and then we will try to see what we will try to what I've been, and then we will try to see what questions arise. So to start with, gum stabilized metal nanoparticles. I'm starting with the green method, but slowly we will come to others also. So why gum? Gum acacia, it is a very, very commonly available material, and also it's biocompatible, and it's being used in various industries. And the structure is a little complicated, but my interest towards this is because it is a good crystal growth modifier. It is a metal reducing agent, and which is generally, as I said, people use toxic materials for doing this. I will list out all the materials which people generally use. But in this, what happens is this functional group, which is OH, like from alcohols and phenols and so on, is present in arabinos and ramos. And this functional group, which is COH, which is present in gluconic acid, these are the ones which play a major role in the growth and formation of metal nanoparticles, and also when you're talking about biomimicking in the formation of metal carbonates. Okay, so these functional groups, mainly OH and COH, present in this sugar and this gluconic acid, plays a vital role in the synthesis of metal nanoparticles. And because of the CO2 which is present in the gluconic acid, they can be used as metal for biomimicking nature. They can be used for the synthesis of metal carbonates. And one another thing, when the major problem with this metal nanoparticles is because of the surface charge, they tend to agglomerate, and they try to form bulk materials. I will show you one example where such thing happens. And when they normally people add a surfactant so that this agglomeration cannot can be avoided, and the colloidal solution remains as such. But the advantage in this gum is there is a proteinaceous core with amino acids, and this acts as a surfactant and does not allow these metal nanoparticles to colloid or anything and to form agglomerates. So all the characters that are required for the synthesis of metal nanoparticles, like reducing agent, it can be a crystal growth modifier, it can be a template, it can be also used as a template, and so we can also be used as a template. And because of the proteinaceous core, it is also having a surfactant inherent in it. So that is why all the properties that are required for the synthesis of metal nanoparticles are there in these gums. So that taking that as advantage, we try to work on it. So if you see this, these are some of the reducing agents that people use, like sodium borohydrate, hydrazine, hydrogen gas, aldehyde, sugars, polyols and all. So these are some things that people try to use, and depending on the element, some need harsh conditions, some can be done at room temperature, some need a little higher temperatures, some need solvents, organic solvents, which can also be making a difference. So depending on such things, there are possibilities that these are various reducing agents which are generally toxic, and people try to use all these for the reduction of these metal ions into their metal nanoparticles. Along with this, they have to use a stabilizer or a surfactant so that it can prevent uncontrollable growth of particles. These are the main things. It can be called as a stabilizing agent, as a surfactant. We can have ligands for doing that. It is also called as a capping agent or a passivating agent or a stabilizer, surfactant, all mean the same. And the purpose for using this is to prevent uncontrolled growth of particles. I will explain in my example how we can control the size of the particles by playing with the concentration of the gums. Okay. Then agglomeration, which is very important, because if we are making these nanoparticles and then if they are agglomerating into a bulk form, then the surface area that is available for such reactions goes down drastically. So we have to see that these kind of agglomerations do not take place. Growth, crystal growth, particle size, and such things. So all these things are very important. And the advantage of gum is all these are inherently there in this gum. So let us try to take example and try to see that. But before that, what are the other, I've talked about gums, but there are plant extracts which people are using for the green particles, the green synthesis of nanoparticles. And what are the things that are responsible? If we try to look at it, it is the flavonoids, it is the alkaloids, terpenoids, and polyphenols, which are the ones which are the major element, major components that actually help in reducing these metal ions into metal nanoparticles. So let us look at this gum acacia. We initially started with silver and gold. And it was very easy to synthesize them. We took the silver precursor as silver nitrate and took the concentration of gum acacia solution, mixed together, and left it overnight without even heating. We left it overnight. And when we came the next day, we saw a change in color. That change in color is an indication that something has happened. Some reaction has taken place. So then what we did first to start with, we did a UV spectra. We took a UV spectra, and by looking at the surface resonance plasma peak, we could understand that, okay, it's this silver nano. But until unless when we saw it in a TEM, we were not very clearly sure. So then we saw that these things are there in silver nanoparticles. And then we did for gold, which was also very easy. We did at room temperature. And then when the concentration of this gum was increased, we observed that it took a form of a template like this. You can see it's a pyramid with all different faces here. So what happened is it formed a template on which these gold nanoparticles nicely got arranged on it. So this kind of decoration of gold nanoparticles on such a template, it proves that this material can also be used as a template for the synthesis of metal nanoparticles in different shapes and in different forms. But our interest, as I said, is all about catalysis at the institute. And we worked on palladium and platinum. So palladium, as you all know, for most of the carbon bond formation, CC bond formation reactions, like Suzuki and other kind of reactions, people use palladium as a catalyst. So we tried to work on palladium as a starting example. So this is how it looked. This is the precursor starting, pale yellow in color, and this could not be, next day, when we put it at overnight, we change in color. Okay, I could not see any change in color. Okay, I could not see any change in color. So what happened? Then we had to heat the reaction at 100 degrees centigrade for about 6 hours. So and this is the peak characteristic of palladium 2+ ion. So as we heated, and then we looked at the reaction procedure and how the reaction progresses, with the time we could see that this disappearance of the peak of palladium 2 plus is an indication that, palladium has reduced to palladium 0. And simultaneously, we could see a change in the color of the solution. So this change in color is also an indication. Then we did all XRD and other things. And when I did this because as I said, I am into characterization, and when I do all these things myself, I got very excited to see that all these particles are of uniform size and they are dispersed all through the grid. Wherever I could see the grid, they are all very nicely dispersed, and the size most of the time is between 8 to 10 nanometers. And when these particles are of uniform size, especially palladium, is less than 10 nanometers, it is a wonderful catalyst for many of the organic reactions. So as I said, we have to do at different temperatures because optimization, as I said, the pH, temperature, and such things are all there. So we try to do at different temperatures like 40, 60, 80, and 100. You will see that at the lower temperatures, they are not so uniformly developed at that temperature. It was only at 100 degrees that you start to see that there are plenty of them and their size is also uniform. So that is how we have to try to optimize the parameter. Here again, we can play with the concentration of gum, and that results in a different example. So that's what we did here. As this is at the lower concentration, as we increase the concentration of the gum, you see that this particle size is less compared to the initial one. So when the concentration is less, the steric hindrance on the growth of these nanoparticles is also less. That is the reason they grow into bigger particles. But as the concentration of the gum is increased, the hindrance is also increased, and that limits these particles to lower size. And that is why you see that at higher concentration, we could have these particles of 8 to 10 nanometers in size, uniform in size. And of course, when we did one example, like a catalytic reaction, and this is the conventional method. Okay, these are the starting material, and this is the final product, and this is the conventional method which normally people use. But the problem here is we have used, they use reducing agents, 2 reducing agents here. Actually, there is another thing which is missing here because we have a bromine here, so we have to use a halogenating agent also and a base. So that means that 2 reducing agents, 1 halogenating agent, and a base. So we have to use all these 3 or 4, then only you will be able to get this product, which means that you will get a product. Along with that, you will be generating waste in the form of the reducing agents, halogenating agent, and the base. But when we look at these nanoparticles, you have these particles here, you have the starting materials in methanol, and at room temperature with hydrogen balloon as with a hydrogen balloon attached to that, you will end up getting this material. No other reducing agents, nothing else. You can separate these nanoparticles after the reaction and then go for the next reaction. So which means that you get the product without generating any waste, and that is the advantage. One another very important thing about these gums is these gums are soluble only in water. Okay? And here we are talking about methanol. So what happens is, you can see this mechanism here. So what happens is these palladium nanoparticles are coated with gum as a surface protection. Okay, and once when you calcine it, their pores developed and all. So when we put a hydrogen balloon to heat, they form palladium hydride bonds, and this acts as a catalyst for the various organic reactions. So this palladium hydride acts as a catalyst, and that is how you end up getting these catalytic products. So the advantage, as you can appreciate here, you are having no in this case you have generate also the waste along with the product, but in this it's very easy. With at room temperature you can have with just an hydrogen balloon attached to it, using methanol as an organic solvent, you can get the desired product. Then we try to work on platinum, because platinum is another interesting substance, and here it was still more interesting in the sense the size of the particle is between 2 to 3 nanometers. That was 8 to 10 nanometers, and even at that scale, you can very clearly see that this is the platinum nanoparticle lattice spacing. So this is before reaction and this is after reaction. And even after reaction, the size is almost remaining the same, about 2 to 3 nanometers. Okay. Then this is how the monitoring at different stages at 0 hours and at about 6 hours, you see that this kind of a change in color, and then that is how we differentiate that, an XRD for that. And we used for this kind of reaction. Here we used as water as a solvent, again hydrogen as a balloon, and at room temperature we could able to hydrogenation of nitroarenes to amines. Then we came to this biomineralization, where we can synthesize these inorganic organic hybrid materials, like for example strontium oxide, barium carbonates, and such things. So natural gums can be of any varieties. We can look at that. But the material is powder form. In the inorganic material is in powder form, but with the approaching by this bio-inspired approach, we can synthesize these hybrid materials, which can take various shapes like this, nano flowers of this kind, rice grains of this, cubes, some kind of structures which are very interesting. I will try to show some of these things that we have done. And the biomineralization is nothing but we are looking at nature and trying to mimic nature. So when we go along beaches, we see such kind of interesting structures. So same thing we are trying to mimic by using chemical roots. So they organic materials can be polysaccharides, glycoproteins, proteins, or anything in biominerals. So inorganic materials like silica, hydroxyapatite, kinds of bones and all, calcium carbonate, and so on. So these are some things that we are trying to look at and try to synthesize these kind of structures. This is another work which we had done ourselves in collaboration with an optal scientist. So actually, this is a cataract lens of that is normally used for small children. So with the time, what happens is the salt that is generated in the body and the dust particles that are coming from this atmosphere, they try to form some sorts of solutions in the eye, and some crystal growth, nucleation takes place, and there whatever conditions that are present, they are influencing in the growth of these kind of materials on the these lenses. So what happens is, over a period of time, they are blocking the vision of the children, and they are not able to see things clearly. So this is also one example of biomineralization that is happening in these kind of contact lenses. And this was very interesting in the sense I didn't know that chemical root synthesis and all is okay, but practically these things happen in a normal life, normal kind of this thing was a surprise for me. And then we looked at this electron microscope, and then we did all. But interestingly, they take such irregular shape, which is interesting to look at. So as I said, these ions, they form whatever carbonates or sulfates or whatever. The nucleation takes place, and these nucleated particles self-assemble into different shapes. And with the time, this organization of things takes place, and crystal aggregates are formed, and these kind of things are happening in the shape formation. So this is one example of barium carbonate using gum acacia as a precursor. Here what we have done is, we have done these experiments at normal conditions, without gum, normal conditions, and hydrothermal conditions. So you can see that by changing this reaction procedure, you can synthesize these materials of different shapes. This one which you see inset here is one without any gum. So they are formed in the form of rods. But when this gum is taken at room temperature, you see that the only difference is the concentrations. Like here we are taken 0.5%, it's 1.0%. You see a change in depending on the concentration also, you see a difference. It's only generally rods here, but here you see these rods assembled in the form of some dumbbells or something like that. These are hydrothermal conditions. These dumbbells at normally conditions have a different shape, a well-organized shape here, which is better than this. Okay. So similarly here you can see that the shapes are different when compared to the ones without the gum and without hydrothermal conditions. So that is how they are seeing a difference. But little closely, if you observe, each particle can also be identified, which actually is the starting for this kind of formation, and which self-assemble into such kind of properties, and then they try to work on it. So here what we have done is we have taken some rare earth dopants like terbium and lanthanum. So when these dopants are taken in so less concentrations, also you see that there is a change in the morphology of these kind of materials. This is strontium carbonate. Here again, this is without gum. This is with gum, but not normal conditions. This is with the gum with a higher concentration. And this is at hydrothermal conditions with 0.5% and 1%. So here again, you can see a change in the morphology, like a nice rice grains kind of a thing. At little higher concentration, they are getting that growth process is taking a different shape, and that is how it's ending up in these kind of materials. So the same thing in the TEM image. Here again, you can see the formation in the same thing, and by SAED pattern, we can confirm that it is strontium carbonate and so on. Here again, lanthanum and terbium changes in the shape of this material with small dopants of other kind of materials also plays a difference. So which by this what I mean to say is these reaction parameters are so critical that small changes also make a difference or influence the formation of these kind of materials. So then we worked on zinc oxide nanoparticles. Zinc oxide is a very commonly known method for synthesis, but when we try to look at this difference by using gum. So the zinc acetate is the precursor here, different concentrations of gum and sodium hydroxide, oil bath and pressure tubes, and try to do all sorts of things and then synthesize here. If you look at these structures, zinc oxide without gum is about 100 to 200 nanometers. The size is little big, but same thing in with the gums. What happens is the size is reduced to about 2 nanometers or so in these kind of this thing. And one another thing is this gum forms globules. So as I talked about the template formation in the gold nanoparticles, here what happens is these gums form globules, and on which these 2 to 3 nanometers size zinc oxide nanoparticles are sitting on it, are getting decorated in the form of crystal spheres, which I can explain in this mechanism, where you can see that these kinds of crystals are getting nicely decorated on the globules of gum. As I said, this can be dissolved in water. If we can carefully take these globules and then slowly get the core dissolved, then you can have hollow particles of zinc oxide nanoparticles, and then maybe you can use it for various other applications. So gum acacia here acts as a template in the form of globules, and where the zinc oxide nanoparticles can be decorated. Then I have about half an hour, I think. Anyway, so now coming to this next stage of core shell nanoparticles. Why core shell and kind of materials? I will try to explain. So here, for example, you can have core materials like, it can be a magnetic material. It can be hollow, where you can put some drugs like a drug reservoir, or you can have some fluorescent material or whatever. So you can have two different materials, one as the core and a shell of different material, having two different kinds of properties. But when they are together, you develop a synergy between the two materials such that you have properties that are different from either the core or the shell. So if there is a synergy, it is always possible that there is influence and have a positive effect for various applications. So in this kind of things, like in a shell material, you can have stabilization. You can coat it with, for example, you have magnetic material, which is, it can degrade its magnetization with time. But if you have coated, because it can get, reacted with the oxygen that is there in the property. So you can have some coating on it, and then you can protect that magnetization. Okay, so like that, you can do all that. So I will try to explain how we try to use this technology, and then we try to explain that. So as you can see here, you have monodispersity in size. You have the metal core here. You have the oxide shell here, and a coating which is also there. So, for example, when you talk about catalytic activities, like the oxidation reduction reactions taking place here on the surface, okay? So all such things can happen on the surface. So core shell processability, solubility and stability, depending on the shell, modification of the shell, like, it can be hydrophobic or hydrophilic, you can modify their solubilities and play with that. Say ease of self-assembly, and various applications like nanoscale optics, electronics, magnetic, catalytic, chemical, and biological fields. So I will be talking about the catalytic application of core shell and how that has made a difference. And in this example, multi-functionalized core shell nanoparticles. So here, core and shell are one material, but the surface which is available for our this thing, you can have the magnetic or fluorescent material as the core. You can, for example, you can coat it with this next shell of silica. Then the shell too can be, functionalization by, having such that, you have the various functional groups onto the outer surface, where you can have these, stabilizers and targeting moieties attached to that, and so on. So that means you can play with these core shell nanoparticles such that you have materials which are having different applications. And these functionalizing, for example, here, they have used amino propyl triethoxysilane, so which is what you can see here. So that is the APS, which is amino propyl triethoxysilane is the functionalizing group. I will try to explain those in the next slide. Then what are the different types of core shell nanoparticles? Depending on the material that is used as the core and depending on the material that is used as the shell, they can be, semiconductor, like here, like you have zinc selenide and cadmium sulfide. Semiconductor metal polymer, metal oxide as a shell, and metal semiconductor. So depending on whatever material you use as the core and the other material which you use as the shell, you have these kind of different types of core shell nanoparticles. Like you can see here, it's a monolayer coated on the core particle, and with as you increase the coating on the core and increase the thickness of the shell, you will see that ultimately you will not be able to see the core, which means that the shell thickness has increased and the contrast is not very clearly seen. And these are the varieties, like you have this shell material, functionalized material here attached onto the outer surface of the core. So like you can arrange nicely all the shell materials like this, a core shell kind of a thing. These are the particles encapsulated in a sphere of spherical particle here, hollow particles here. Here you have core shell kind of a morphology. So these are different varieties of core shell particles. So how do they actually influence? Here again, I'm coming back to optical properties because we can see and start to believe a change in their property. So here, these are only gold ions. And here, this is only an increase in the concentration of gold from 0.15 mole% to about 0.90. As you increase the concentration, here it is ions, here it is gold nanoparticles. And you can see that it is the intensity is increasing, but the what is called the red wine color is almost the same. And that is what you take one gold particle here, and this colloidal solution looks something red wine in color. To this gold nanoparticle, if you coat with silver, okay, like here you see the gold nanoparticle here coated with silver, it is yellow in color, contrastingly different. It's not red wine in color anymore. It's a different colloidal solution. Then again coat with gold. Then you see it has come down to a different color. And again coat with silver. You see then it's come back to its red wine color. It means that there is something synergetic activities are happening. And that is why that is resulting in a change in its optical property. These colloidal solutions are having different colors. So these are about 60 nanometers in size. So this is how you can see a difference in their properties. So when we are talking about optical here, it means that this also can be understood in other mechanical, thermal, or catalytic, or other kind of properties as well. then as this by simple UV, we can understand this thing. Like, if the thickness of the, for example, here a silica sphere is coated with gold, and the surface plasma resonance peak is around these many nanometers, when the thickness of the shell is about 5 nanometers. As the thickness of the shell is increased, you see that this surface resonance plasma peak is shifting towards lower wavelengths, and around it is for when it is 20 nanometers, it's come down to between 700 to 750 nanometers. So like that, this shift in the surface plasma peak gives us an idea about the thickness of the coatings, depending on the material that we have used for coating. So coming to my work, initially we started with silica nanoparticles using the Stauber method that I have already mentioned, where we can synthesize these silica nanoparticles of uniform size and uniform shape by taking the precursor ratios appropriately. So this is an interesting work for me because these kind of reactions, this, for example, this radioselective synthesis of beta amino alcohols, it's a very well-known reaction. But the thing is, people have used harsh conditions or some thing like that. But here what we did was we just used silica nanoparticles, and at room temperature, within 15 to 50 minutes, we were able to create, get the desired products of our interest. And it's interesting, it was also very important for me that because this paper got accepted within 3 weeks. And that gave me a lot of satisfaction, because that was the time when I started to think of working on these kind of materials. So it gave me a lot of satisfaction to start with. And green chemistry, we're not using any harsh conditions, or we are not using any organic solvents for the reaction. So that's how we were looking at the water as a solvent, and room temperature, at room temperature, we were able to synthesize this. As I said, by changing these reaction conditions a little, by changing the reaction conditions here, like 4 units of ammonium hydroxide and 8 units of ammonium hydroxide, you can see that the size difference is so low. These are all uniform of about 60 to 70 nanometers in size. This is about 350 nanometers in size when you have taken 8 parts of sodium ammonium hydroxide. So then what we did, because we had to see the influence of the size on this catalytic reaction. So we tried to look at their surface area, which is the one which plays an active role, major role when we are using these materials as catalysts. So when we do that, these 60 to 70 nanometer silica nanoparticles have surface area of about 240 meters square per gram, whereas this 350 nanometers have 20 meters square per gram. So which means that the surface area is come down so drastically when the size is increased to 350 nanometers per nanometers size of silica particles. So obviously, these particles, which are 60 to 70 nanometers, are better catalysts. It gives a better yield when compared to these particles, which are at 350 nanometers. That's how we try to look at the variations, size or influence of size on the catalytic activity. Then we started work on this core shell nanoparticles. So initially, we started with copper nanoparticles coated on the silica nanoparticles, followed by tungsten as this shell material, and then we try to do these kind of reactions. So well, I'm not talking much of the reaction, but the synthesis is what is very important, and that is what we will try to understand. Because as I said, we use the same Stauber method for the synthesis of these metal nanoparticles. So once we have these silica nanoparticles, we try to do this. Now, when we want to have the shell material on this, generally there is no friendly relationship between the two, because there is no bonding actually, there is no bonding. And that is why when you have that kind of material for catalytic applications, leaching of the shell material is very easy, and it takes place in the first reaction cycle only. So in order to have these particles nicely bonded to the surface, we have to do some change. And that is because these silica nanoparticles have OH terminals on the surface. So there is no way these metal nanoparticles can form bonds onto this. So in such case, what we have to do is we have to modify this surface, that is surface functionalization or surface modification by appropriate ligands so that you can have these metal nanoparticles as shell material on this. So in this case, when we try to do with 3-amino-propyl triethoxysilane as the functionalizing agent, you have seen that these OH terminals are now changed to NH2 terminals, which can be used as the ends for the attachment of this copper ions. And when you reduce it with hydrogen hydride, you have these copper metals sitting on the shell. And because of this interaction, the functionalizing agent, they are bound to the surface of the core by the shell material. So, and generally, how do we we can see that by this kind of a thing? Well, the only thing is here you can see one example, a silica sphere here with these small particles of copper that are decorated on this kind of material. This is one at one stage, but if you go on coating layer after layer, you can have more copper nanoparticles onto the spheres. This is by atomic force microscope, and this is by TEM. Most of the particles are about 55 to 60 nanometers, and that is what you see by atomic force microscope also, about 50 nanometers in size. Now, how do we know that this functionalizing material is there in these core shell nanoparticles, like because it can be silica copper core shell nanoparticles. So what people can that can be obtained by doing FTIR or like that. But when we talk about that, we try to do with the TGA, that is thermogravimetric analysis coupled to mass, so that we could see at around 350 degrees centigrade this decomposition step which you see here, these functionalizing agent, or that is the triethoxypropyl silane, which is 1 minute. This triaminopropyl trioxyethoxysilane is the functionalizing agent, and these moieties are the fragments that are getting decomposed at this temperature. And when we observe these molecular fragments, it's confirmed that these this functionalizing agent still exists in these kind of core shell nanoparticles. And this result is by the XPS. Well, I will just briefly tell here. Sometime later when we have an opportunity, I'll talk about XPS in detail. But X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy basically is by photoelectric effect. And Professor Segman from Uppsala University has developed that basic principle of photoelectric effect into an analytical tool, for which he got Nobel Prize in the year 1981. It is a valuable technique because it gives us information about the elements present on the sample. Well, to get the information about elements present on the sample, there are so many different techniques like atomic absorption spectroscopy, ICP, and so on. But this is doing something more. It gives us an idea about their oxidation state and their molecular environment. So oxidation state here is like, for example, copper. Copper can be copper 0 or copper 2+. Okay, and about the environment. So for example, copper nitrate, copper sulfate, copper oxide. So the environments around copper metal are different in all the three. It is nitrogen here, it is sulfur here, it is oxygen here. So this all influence the electronic configuration along the copper. And that is seen as a shift in the binding energy. So when we did that analysis for this is the fresh catalyst. And you see that this peak around 932.4 electron volts is due to copper in its metallic state, because we have used hydrogen hydride and reduced it to copper 0. So fresh catalyst, it is copper 0, but the used catalyst, you can see there is a broadening of this peak, and along with this peak, there is another peak here, which is due to copper in its ionic form, that is copper 2+. So this one is due to copper 0, and this one is due to copper 2+. So that means, as I said, in XPS, you can know the elements present, you can know their oxidation state, like in this example, the presence of copper in 2 oxidation states, simultaneous presence of the element in 2 oxidation states, copper 0 and copper 2+. And you can also know get an idea about their molecular environment, which is like copper nitrate, sulfate, and oxide example. So like that. So for example, I will also take one example of iron in my next few slides, and then I will try to explain there. So these are various surface modifiers. This is the one which I've told you. So depending on the kind of terminal functional group you want, you can have different kinds of functionalizing agents. Like, if you have amine in our example, if you want sulfur as the terminal this thing, you have to use thiols, phosphines. I will show one example here, methoxysilanes and all. So people, after doing all this, people try to characterize this linkage of this functional group modification is generally studied by FTIR or TGA mass, like I showed the example. In this example, I think I'll have to go a little fast, nearing 12 o'clock. So, okay. This is actually synthesis of platinum nanoparticles. So this is a reaction which we did. And these are the platinum nanoparticles that we obtained. Very fine, good. But what happened within no time, they started to agglomerate and settle down like this, as you can see here, which means that these are, formation of platinum nanoparticles is happening, but they are getting agglomerated within no time. So when we try to use these kind of ligands, we could end up having these kinds of colloidal solutions of platinum. And even for this madam was a DST scientist with me. So she has left almost 2 years now, but still these colloidal solutions are as such even now in my lab like this. So this, you can see how these functionalizing ligands are making a difference, and so that these metal nanoparticles do not agglomerate. So I think, okay. Then we try to develop this core shell nanoparticles for the synthesis of hollow iron oxide. Same procedure with the precursors for the silica. You have the silica core functionalization, FeCl3 as the precursor for iron. You have iron oxychloride here, calcine at about 100 degrees centigrade, core shell iron oxide particles. And when you selectively remove the silica, you have hollow particles of iron oxide. At various stages, we try to look at this by TEM. At the end of this, after remove HF treatment and calcining at 100,000 degrees, you see that they are very hollow particles, and the hollowness is very clear. I think I will stop after this polyaniline, because it's all. Is it okay if we can go a little further?
Yes, sir. You can continue.
Okay, then I can continue a little more. Okay.
Yeah.
So polyaniline, this is, as you all know, it's a conducting polymer, and for these are the 3 people who got Nobel Prize for for this synthesis of these conducting polymers. And I was this work which is shown here, polyaniline with niobium oxide. Well, I was fortunate enough to have done this work, and in the process get associated with Professor McDermott, who is also an author in this paper. It's an interesting work here. But and it has been used as a catalyst support by various people, many different people. But we have also done like polyaniline and all doped with palladium, osmium, and osmium rhenium and all in our institute, in our own lab. But our interest was a little different. So we wanted to do something different. In the process, what we did was we took different ratios of aniline to sodium hydroxide precursors. And when we, following the same procedure, we can see that these, we could end up getting polyaniline in different shapes. It can be spheres, it can be rods, and it can be in tubes by simply changing the ratios of aniline sodium hydroxide. Okay, so I'll show here by scanning electron microscope and the TEM images. These are spheres, these are rods. You can very clearly see there are there is no contrast where you can see them as tubes. But whereas in these tubes there are few microns in length, but the internal diameter on this contrast is very much different when they are hollow, and they are open-ended tubes. And that is how by changing the precursors of aniline and sodium hydroxide, you can have this polymerization tuned such that you can synthesize the same material in different forms. So our here we are trying to understand the shape versus selectivity for various applications. We try to, at various intervals of time, we try to look at the shapes. It's an irregular kind of a thing at about 1 hour after starting the polymerization. So by 6 hours, it is training some irregular shapes growth, and particle growth, self-assembling is taking place. By 12 hours, you start to see the formation of rods, but by 24 hours, you can very clearly see these are crystalline, and they are nicely decorated in the form of rods. And we try to do the surface area, because when we talk about catalytic activities, surface area is very important. This was like functional. I mean, here we are trying to dope with vanadium as a precursor, and then we try to look at the surface area, and you can see that spheres are about 10 meters square per gram, rods 22.27 meters square per gram, and this tubes are little higher, about 24 to 25 meters square per gram. So like in our earlier example in silica, where higher surface area, better catalytic activity. So obviously it is these tubes which are showing better catalytic activity or selectivity or catalytic activity. And this was the reaction, sulfoxidation. So depending on the different shapes, the conversions, 30% conversion by about 30 minutes by spheres, 90% for rods, and 100% for the tubes. And selectivity towards sulfoxides is like this. Because that is also one thing. The catalytic selectivity is one thing, and the conversion reactions are other things. So we try to understand that. Then we started work on magnetic nanoparticles. Well, this is a very good review article on magnetic nanoparticles, synthesis, production, functionalization applications, which gives an overall idea about these magnetic nanoparticles. So the major problem with these nanoparticles is separation from the reaction mixture. Separation from the reaction mixture. Most of the times we have to use high revolving centrifuges for getting these particles separated from the reaction mixture. But if they are magnetic, it's so easy. Like you could put a magnet next to it, you can have the catalyst separate, you can have the product separated, and then you can carry on your work for the next reaction. So like that. And these magnetic particles are finding applications in biomedicine and so on. So for example, catalysts, nucleation for growth, and this thing, nanomaterials, and toxic waste remediation, and so on. So we try to look at that, and here's one example: silica nanoparticle coated with iron oxide, and in 2 different organic solvents. This is the colloidal solution. By just placing a magnet, you can have these magnetic nanoparticles separated from the reaction mixture. We started from this initial 3-component reaction, where the synthesis of propargylamines, and then we continue to do with various kind of reactions, tetrazoles and trizoles and so on. And these are the TEM images before and after. You can see that they were about 25 nanometers in size before and after. Yeah, this is the one which I was talking about, the XPS for Fe3O4. So when here the thing is, the Fe3 plus this is the crystal structure for Fe3O4, where you have Fe3 ions in tetrahedral states here, and here tetrahedral states, and some Fe2 plus and Fe3 plus, equal amount of 50% of 52 plus Fe2 plus and Fe3 plus in both octahedral and tetrahedral sites, where they try to hop into and try to change into Fe2 plus or Fe3 plus in the octahedral sites. So when such a thing is done by an XPS, well, detection of iron is one. This is what is called a survey scan, and these peaks around 700 electron volts are due to the iron which is there. And when we look at these high resolution narrow scans, iron, because it is in 2 different oxidation states, we get 2 different peaks, one due to the Fe2 plus and the other due to Fe3 plus. So this is the fresh catalyst, and this is the fresh catalyst and the used catalyst. And in both cases, you can see that the ratio of Fe2 plus and Fe3 plus also remains the same. So in this technique, one of the very few techniques which gives us information about the metals, their oxidation state, and their molecular environment. And then we did a little more, changed to copper as a dopant, and then copper Fe2O4. And when we use such reactions, our interesting thing is to understand the mechanism. Because if there is no synergy between the various ions that are present in these materials, the reaction yields or selectivities or conversions would be very, they will be less. But when we did this reaction, you can see that, there is a synergetic effect between this copper and iron metal clusters in this material. And that is the reason we are, seeing increase in yield. And this, reaction was getting completed in about 8 to 10 hours with higher yields. Then our interest is to understand how and where exactly these, metal ions are acting as catalysts. So if you see here, if this copper 2+ is getting converted to copper 1+ at this stage, and because of this activity, and this has to be regenerated into its normal copper 2+ form, and that is happening at the later stage because of the iron that is present in the iron Fe2+ and iron Fe3+ form. So this is the two things. These are the two in this mechanism. The rest of all is known, but what is interesting here is copper 2+ getting converted to copper 1+ in situ, and this copper 1+ have to regenerate back to its copper 2+ form, and that is happening because of this iron 2+, and the presence of iron 2+, which is playing the major role for the catalytic activity. So this synergetic effect of copper and iron in this example was what was getting as improved synthetic yields for the desired materials. So this is another thing that we have done for synthesis of new molecules. So these are known molecules called resveratrol and chalcocine, and this is beta nitrostyrene. What we did is, like, we tried to take pharmacophores of from all these 3 molecules and design our own molecules, like here. So this is the starting material, and these are the pharmacophores from the respective drugs which are already known, resveratrol, chalcocine, and others. And then we designed all these kind of molecules, and then we studied this. I'll go a little faster here. So this is what we have done, and different molecules and so on. So the same, we started. But the interesting thing is, wherever there is Heck coupling, Suzuki coupling, for these kind of reactions, we try to use these metal nanoparticles, palladium metal nanoparticles synthesized by gum acacia. And for example, here Heck coupling and all. For these kind of CC bond reactions, we have tried to use this, the catalysts that were synthesized in the form of metal nanoparticles. But in this molecule, because the ending up with this, the amount of the desired product at the end of the reaction generally is very less. But so when we used this, so that is why we have used normal reaction conditions to synthesize these kind of molecules. So as I said, we are working on hydrogen production and CO2 reduction, and these are the studies that are going on now. And for that, we are synthesizing such materials. Well, these are routine things where we can see that they are done by hydrothermal conditions, and that is how they look by the HIDALF and their chemical mapping images. And this is the other one which we are trying to work on. These are all still unpublished, so I don't want people to take them as this thing. This is called zinc oxide rods and so on. And coming to the end, I'm trying to put this nanoparticles for various applications here. It can be energy, materials, biological, chemical, and all. So you will see that there are diverse applications. There is still a lot of scope for the use of these nanoparticles for various kinds of usage for common use. So here again, same things. We try to look at the present and future applications. For example, if you look at these energies, okay, where because people are working on magnetic materials and so on. So magnetic refrigeration, nanostructured electrodes, magnetic metals for soft metal nanoparticles, better batteries, like was introduced initially. Our HOD sir was telling about batteries from carbon nanotubes and fluorons and so on. So any better possibilities are there in all these kinds of areas, like solar cells, photovoltaic, and water splitting, because we are working on different kinds of materials there. So everything is possible, self-cleaning, windows or walls and so on. So everything is possible. So properties are influenced by all the properties. Hello? Yeah. coming to the end of my talk, there are only 2 or 3 slides left. Because I see that about some people are already working in nanomaterials. This slide is for them who are still, who want to use the various facilities that are there in all the CSIR labs across the country. This portal was opened by our Director General on the 9th February 2019. So at this portal, all the facilities in all the CSIR labs are available for use by common people. So researchers who are working in this area, want to use the facilities, then definitely go to this website, which is www.analyticscsir.in, and try to look at the various facilities, select the facilities, and from the various labs that are there, and try to use them. Of course, they are all on payment basis because nothing is done free these days. But at least they are available for use. And these are, I have to thank my director, who is the source of inspiration for us. He's a very well-known natural product synthesis person, and he is very good in all sorts of organic synthesis. But though I am a physicist, I could do all sorts of chemistry because of the support that I have received from all these people. And these are some of my students who have done all this work. And these 2 instruments, I am again coming back here. This is the transmission electron microscope, and this is the X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy instrument. I consider them to be my 2 eyes in the institute, because with these 2 instruments, I could see the beautiful world of nanoscience and nanotechnology. And I'm sure all of you know her. And when I happened to go to the Missionaries of Charity at Kolkata, these lines caught my attention. What I can do, you cannot. What you can do, I cannot. But together we can do something beautiful for God. So when you look at this nanotechnology, as I have already told in my first slide, it is an interdisciplinary area where people from all branches of sciences have to work together for the synthesis of new materials and for their new applications, which can be used for mankind, for the betterment of mankind. So I take these lines very dear to me, because we have to work together to do something beautiful for mankind by using nanoscience and nanotechnology. And once again, I thank you all for giving me this wonderful opportunity, and thank you all for the patience for listening to my talk on a Sunday. Once again, Satyanarayan Garu, I will thank you all. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I thanks to Sridhar Garu also, and to my friend Divakar, who made this possible. Once again, thank you very much. And if there are any questions, please feel free to ask me, or you can email me and get your answers. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So such a phenomenal insight on nanotechnology paradigm, sir. Thank you so much. Sir, now I will welcome our beloved principal, sir. I request our beloved principal, Dr. G. Amarendra, sir, to share his valuable words pertaining to this webinar, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh. Good afternoon, everybody. The speaker for this webinar, Dr. Sridhar, scientist at IISc, CSIR, Hyderabad. My dear Vice Principal and HOD of HNS, Dr. Sridhar, and my dear participants of this webinar on very important topic, is nanophysics, nanotechnology. So these words are very much eye-catching, and they are going to be the future technologies for all of us. And the last 20-25 minutes, just I was listening to this wonderful session, and there are certain things which are really extraordinary, and definitely all the participants must have got a lot of enrichment in the field of nanotechnology. And I was very much impressed by looking at the application part of nanotechnology towards energy, towards solar photovoltaic cells. These things are going to be very, very useful, and we will be keeping on listening about these topics down the line. So in future, we have to depend upon only nanotechnology in the field of pharmaceuticals, in the field of agriculture, in the field of energy and whatnot. So everywhere, this nanophysics or nanotechnology is going to be very, very vital for all of us. So I take this opportunity to thank the keynote speaker, Dr. Sridhar Garu, for sparing his valuable time on a holiday. And I would like to thank all the participants for coming in big number. And I would like to congratulate Dr. Sridhar, HOD of H&S, and Dr. Sirish, and all the faculty of H&S for organizing this wonderful seminar on an emerging area. So I wish that we are going to have many such programs down the line. And I request every one of you to take care of yourself and stay home, stay safe, and make sure that you follow all the guidelines given by the government from time to time. So I wish you all the best. Thank you once again. Thank you.
So thank you, sir. Thanks for your wonderful words about this webinar, sir.
So
I
Dr.
request,
Sirish,
sir.
yeah, if anybody has any doubts, they can
Yes.
just raise their hand so that
Yeah.
you can unmute them one by one.
Okay, sir. Let them share in the chat room, chat, sir. Let
Okay.
them. So if anyone have the doubts regarding this particular webinar, you can post your messages in the chat box. Please make it fast. Sir, such a phenomenal insight on nanotechnology paradigm. So I don't think that they are getting the doubts on it.
But anytime they can write to my email.
Yeah, you can ask the doubt, Lakshmi Nath.
Definitely they can get their clarification. That's not a problem.
Sir, one question, sir. One question from Sangeeta. Do nanoceramics dissolve in organic solutions?
See, they don't dissolve. These nanoparticles don't dissolve in anything. They only form colloids. For that, we have to, solution and whatever is the solvent and whatever we'll have to add some surfactant or a capping agent so that you can have a colloidal solutions of these ceramic materials. If it forms a solution, there is no phase. It's a single phase, liquid phase. But colloidal solution is, it's like an intermediate phase where this solid part is there. If it is like it's a tricky thing. If it is there, it is there. It is not there, it is not there. So it's such a kind of phase where you have both the phases. So it only forms a colloidal solution, and that too, if when you put in appropriate surfactants or capping agents into that mixture.
Sir, let us take one more question, sir. Sir, what is the difference in XPS and EDX? How to find different oxidation states of metals in metal oxides from XRD and EDX, sir?
Okay, EDX only gives you the information about the metal concentration. Okay, it gives us only the metal concentration only, whereas in XPS, it is a surface sensitive technique. It gives us information about the metal concentration. Because it's a surface sensitive technique, there is a deviation. The energy required is also less, and there is a little deviation, but it gives us information about the concentration. It also gives us information about the metals, and most important, it gives us the information about its oxidation state, which you don't get.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Sir, let us take last one question, sir. So why gold is yellow color, but gold nanoparticles are ruby red color?
Okay. Okay. See, this is because it's an inert material. Gold generally is thought to be an inert material, and that is why when we are wearing it as an ornament, it is having this surface atmospheric conditions are having no influence on, because there is no chemical reaction taking place on that. But when they are in nano dimension, okay, when they are in nano dimension in colloidal form, depending on the size and shape of these nanoparticles, they are taking different colors. And that color is not the optical, it is what is called the surface resonance phenomena. And you are looking at that kind of color depending on the size and shape.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Yeah.
So many participants are asking for your email ID, sir, with your.
Yeah, 1 minute. I will try to. 1 minute. Stop share. I'll. 1 minute. Come back.
Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Please, don't disturb, sir. Please, I request everyone.
One
Please
minute.
unmute.
I put my first slide so that it becomes easy for the participants to. Where is it? Yeah. So here is this sridharb@iact.s.in. So this is my email address. Please feel free to write to it. And anything, any characterization part, if you are interested, and if there's any thing that needs to be understood, you can definitely email me. And if you find time, please do visit IACT. Look at the facilities, and depending on your interests, try to use them for your applications.
So thanks for your answer, sir. So let me propose the vote of thanks, which is the ending session for it. So good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. K. Sirish Kumar, Associate Professor of Chemistry. It's been a phenomenal and fascinating and very engaging webinar, sir. No doubt in stating this. So please bear with me for a few minutes because there is a huge team behind this meeting who have really put this webinar together. First of all, I would like to thank our renowned speaker, Dr. B. Sridhar Garu. So he's from IICT. So for sparing his precious time, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I thank you. Would be happy to know that you have followed our session on strategic trends and scenario by identifying some trends yourself. So thank you for that. On behalf of the Department of Humanities and Sciences, my heartfelt thanks goes to our management, Principal Sir Dr. G. Amarinder Rao Garu, Vice Principal Sir and HOD HNS Dr. CHSLN Sridhar Garu, Registrar Satyanarayana Sir and Professor Anand Rao Sir. So for giving us a opportunity to organize such a wonderful webinar with the most prominent and renowned speaker. So my heartfelt thanks to all the chemistry and physics faculty who have been exceptionally helpful and been behind the scene. Thank you for all that. So last but not the least, before I end, I must say that the participants are exceptional because without a disciplined and extremely engaged audience, any event cannot be successful. So what I appreciated the most is most of you joined on time. So thanks for your punctuality. So once again, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful day. So thanks, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank
Dr.
you.
Sirish,
Sir.
When are you going to collect the feedback forms?
Sir, I will share, sir.
Okay.
And all the participants be attentive. The certificate is only provided after filling the feedback after 10 minutes. The link will be posted in the WhatsApp group. Please do not be in hurry and flood the WhatsApp group. Please have patience. So within 10 minutes, I'm going to paste this link in the feedback link in the WhatsApp group. Please have patience. Thank you so much, sir. Sridhar, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again, sir. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you. Let us wind up, sir. Thank you.